This video is sponsored by KnucklesOX. As having been unable to sleep in the wake of everything, Raditz and Granola, due to knowing him so well by now, had sensed their dad's intention of leaving almost before he had decided, allowing them to make their own preparations for travel. And after rousing Goku and informing him of their plans, the trio had suppressed their ki and tailed Bardock at a distance to the secret rendezvous. Now, as they watch him board the ship, bound for parts unknown, they do not hesitate to follow, sneaking into the cargo hold just as Oil finishes packing some last-minute acquisitions, and hunkering down as the vessel rises into the air and out of the atmosphere completely, just as quietly and without notice as it came. In their youthful exuberance, none of them stop to consider the danger they are walking into, instead sharing brotherly grins, as it seems they will be going on their space adventure after all, since their plan was so incredibly easy to pull off. Though as they will soon find out, being stowaways is not quite as exciting as they had hoped, as much of it is spent sitting quietly in the darkened hold, trying not to be found. For Raditz and Granola, this isn't so bad, as both have experience with extended tedious space journeys, and so their first instinct is to settle in for the long haul. Though having come to Earth when he was little more than an infant, Goku quickly grows interminably bored, not to mention hungry, since there's no food down here, just boring paintings and statues, and not even the chocolate fountain ones like they have at Boma's. To this end, when his brothers fall into a hushed conversation, he decides to slip off to the galley for a snack, since they won't even notice he's gone. A misapprehension if ever there was one, as the topic of conversation is forming a plan around how not to get caught, with step 1 being don't wander off. Unfortunately, by the time the elder boys turn to relay this to Goku, he is already gone, with the pair splitting up to search the hold for him, since surely even he wouldn't be dumb enough to leave without telling them. Despite being a spacious starcraft with an equally cavernous cargo hold, it does not take the brothers long to spot a figure moving in the distance and rushing towards them, only to find that it is not the small figure of their little sibling, but instead the taller ones of Alex, Oil, and Maki. Having the element of surprise on their side, the Heeters each pull their blasters, which are far less flashy than Alex, though just as deadly, before planting the barrels right over the boys' hearts, knowing even with their enhanced speed, they probably can't dodge a laser at this range, at least not in base form. Raditz and Granola both wisely put their hands up, with Zerlina, as the more familiar with this family, asking if they plan on killing them, pressing her blaster a little tighter into his chest to ensure her shot has no chance of missing at all. Maki sassily leans that that'll be for Elec to decide, though from here on out, they'll be the ones asking the questions, and she's got one for the kiddos right now. What are two of Bardock's sons doing on their ship? This caused the two remaining brothers to share a look that says stealth and diplomacy both have once again seemingly failed them, so now it's either face up to what they've done and possible punishment, or they can just fall back on All Reliable. Instantly sharing the thought that All Reliable is way better than actually being caught by Bardock, the duo prepare to leave after images in their places and counterattack in the hopes of knocking the Heeters out, launching them from the cargo hold to cover their tracks, and finding a new hiding spot. As a crackle of red turns Granola's second eye crimson, at the same time a spark of white causes Raditz's hair to stand on end. Meanwhile, with Bardock, very much like his youngest son, he had decided to sneak down to the galley to view what the Heeters have to offer in terms of snacks, with him entering through the north door just as Goku does from the south. For a moment, neither speak, their eyes glued on each other, as if unable to comprehend what they are seeing, despite this not being an uncommon occurrence back at their home on Mount Pausu. Then, in unison, they move, with Goku diving for a tray of what appeared to be space cones on the counter, and Bardock lunging directly for him. Due to being significantly stronger and bigger, Bardock reaches his son first, though being sneaky and squirmy, Goku quickly slips out of his father's grip and lifts the tray over his head before scarpering back the way he came, as if he pulled off a flawless and unseen heist. Unfortunately here, he runs into someone wily enough to catch him, as when Bardock tries to flicker his body in front of him with the raw speed of his Z-Vanish, cutting off the kid's escape route and forcing him to fess up. Elec has already beaten him to it, and snatched up Kakarot by his tail, and at the same time, quite dexterously, catching the tray of treats as well, while glaring at the dazed Saiyan boy inquisitively, and then glancing up to his father as he comes into view. Having to process that Kakarot has followed him here rather quickly, despite this fact prompting another urgent question, Bardock prioritizes his child's safety foremost, and demands that the Heeter put him down. Glaring coldly once again, Elec seems to tighten his grip on the tail hard, to the point the Saiyan whelp nearly cries out with tears of pain in his eyes, until the ship itself shakes a bit suddenly from the force of something chaotic taking place below. This causes Elec to huff and let Goku go, before making an about face and carrying the tray of scones with him to the bridge to demand of his own what the Saiyans follow him, since he has something Bardock needs to see and sort out immediately, while the adult Saiyan in turn angrily lunges out to keep his kid from bumping his head and reluctantly trails behind, the whole way giving his own stern stare at the boy, and simply asking the questions from earlier. Are Raditz and Granola here too? A bit awkwardly, Goku nods, earning an even deeper sigh from Bardock. But before he can start his scolding with his youngest first, they arrive to the cargo hold from which Goku came from, and in which Elec presents to them the very wild scene of Oil and Maki attempting to subdue the other Saiyan cerulean Stowaways, but having a pretty difficult time with it, to the point they both appear to be seriously considering taking off their necklaces of bones and fangs that bind back their own unleashed power, since by this point, several pieces of cargo have already been destroyed and ruined, meaning they're doubtlessly getting chewed out by Elec, who right about this time is likely regretting giving the two a job he'd usually reserve for gas. This struggle and destruction is on account of both these brats being a good bit stronger than the two Heeters had thought they'd be, even after witnessing the battles of the Saiyan invasion, but also because Raditz' talent for trickery, combined with Granola's talent for indirect combat, has always been a fearsome joint force, and because the duo are more motivated to get out of sight to hide again, so that they don't get in trouble rather than avoiding death at the hands of more space-traveling warriors. Surmising all this, Elec tells the father to fix this and explain himself, with Bardock firmly telling Kakarot not to leave his side, as he and Elec both vanish and appear in between the two sides of the scuffle, bringing it to an end, and forcing an embarrassed and nervous-looking Oil, Maki, Raditz, and Granola to stare at their respective authority figures, whom are awaiting an explanation, skipping to all parties, including Gas, who had been ordered to rest by his brother. Reconvening on the bridge of the ship, it is no surprise that Elec and Bardock are once again in a standoff, as in his full affable voice, the Heeter boss asks if his new partner would like to elucidate this whole stowaway situation, the obvious insinuation being that he believes Bardock had planned something this stupid, or chose to use his kids as pawns, though refusing to be cowed by a grifter, and being just as good at deception as Raditz. Bardock sardonically retorts that he must have forgotten to tell his brats their bedtime story and tuck them in, so they followed him here. Simple as that. In an equally coy voice, Elec comments that he must be one hell of a storyteller, and while the rather childish reply takes one to no one does cross Bardock's mind, he ultimately settles on the more friendly, you would be the expert. For a moment, a tense silence hangs between the men, as neither breaks their gaze, though just when it seems like a fight, or maybe a thunderstorm might be brewing, Elec instead smiles, and warmly tells Maki to get their young guests some quarters, and make sure they are comfortable, since unfortunately, they don't have enough fuel to turn around, and they've just so happened to lose part of the cargo he planned to barter with to fund those refueling costs. Thus, all prior suspicion is gone, in place of that amiable grin, as whether this was a genuine attempt at subterfuge or not, the result was more manpower for their task. Whether it was willingly volunteered or owed to him as a debt didn't matter to Elec, a thought which turns Bardock's stomach, and caused the familiar burning haze of anger to begin clouding his mind. Taking a deep breath in and out, before in a level tone that does little to hide the insistence of this countermanding, Bardock replies that'll do then. With a terse gesture to his elder sons, he leads them back to the lift. Only when the door is closed and sealed, and the Heeters can hear, does he speak, demanding to know what in the home for infinite losers these three boneheads thought they were doing sneaking onto an alien gangster ship. At once, all three boys adopt different styles of rebuttal, creating a cacophony of noise, with Raditz immaturely snapping back that they weren't just going to sit around and do nothing while he went off into space, Granola attempting cool logic as he claims that he was simply not letting his target out of his sights, and Goku earnestly and honestly protesting that they just wanted to help Papa, since they're a team and they only just got him back from being dead. Despite this commotion and uproar making his ears ring, Bardock listens to each without interruption. Then, when they are done, he addresses the three boys sternly, stating that they're fools for coming, since what he's walking into is war, not just some fight or a tournament. And despite their strength and training, the three of them aren't soldiers, they're children, regardless of what Granola and Raditz may think of their short time pulling off dangerous missions in space. That remains to be true. The fights they can get into out here can and will kill them if they aren't careful, and there are no Dragon Balls to get Shinron and Chirumbo to wipe their asses for them right now. With this angry but very truthful pronouncement, he guides him out of the turbo lift and into a vacant set of quarters with enough beds and a food synthesizer that should keep them comfortable and alive, before flatly telling them that if he had more time, he'd turn around and send them home. But since there's not, they're to stay here until he, and only he, comes to get them. Then, without giving them a chance to protest further, he shuts the door and storms away, while muttering bitterly about damn brats. Back in the room, Goku looks up at his brothers, with a crestfallen expression as he sighs that Papa's really mad at them, isn't he? Though shaking his head, Granola refused that isn't what he saw. When he looked at Bardock, he thought the scarred Saiyan looked worried, almost scared, which is weird, while Raditz gripes that they were just trying to do the right thing and back him up, so after all, they shouldn't even get punished, since someone has to watch his back around this Elec guy. In response, Goku admits that the Heeter boss is pretty scary and strong, as his heart is still pumping his Saiyan blood a mile a minute. To this point, his brothers seem dubious over Goku's reading of the power scale between members of the Planet Broker family, since to them, Alec seems no more impressive than Oil or Maki, other than his ruthlessness and cunning, as demonstrated with how he technically defeated Turles. But Gas is most definitely the one they need to worry about the most, since they're lucky he's out of commission for the moment. But Goku, not as fooled by Alec's facade, holds firm and claims that he thinks Papa is just as worried about the Heeters going after the Earth as he is this Freezer guy, to which his brothers attempt to correct him to Frieza, returning to the Saiyan man in question, as he further explores the ship to ensure there will be no more surprises. Bardock's mind is once again drawn back to and almost trapped between the past and present, as he thinks more about the reunion and training with his own father, now that this concept of using one's children as tools for war has resurfaced once again. Having easily intercepted one of his father's blows, the wayward scarred Saiyan son commits to revealing the greater strength he has gained through his own experiences, along with his Saiyan spirit. After all, he's about the same age Cognac was when he first kicked the bucket, but with what he's learned in that same time, he's gone far beyond him and doesn't plan on stopping anytime soon, thus suddenly feeling a desire to pull on techniques he's learned from Muten Roshi and Grandpa Gohan for some reason. Bardock converts this sudden block punch into a game of Jonkin Po, which would make Kakarot rather proud of him, as his own father is left stupefied, using the distracting attack methods and patterns, and the attempt to poke the older Saiyan in the eyes for a fake out to pull off an after image instead, allowing Bardock to break Cognac's sloppy and undisciplined guard in order to grab him by the tail and begin brutally slamming him to and fro with the goal of either ripping the damn thing out or putting his opponent through the densely compact ground of King Kai's planet. Seemingly impressed, perplexed, appalled, and overwhelmed by this un-Saiyan-like counterattack, it appears like the other scarred Saiyan will need to yield, but instead, he gives out a loud whistle as a signal, so that Bardock doesn't get far into the momentum of this maneuver before there is more interference, as a familiar ki attack slams into Bardock from his blind side and breaks the two fighters up for a moment. Searching for the culprit of the bright blue flame bullet, the scarred warrior is legitimately surprised, but no less ecstatic to see none other than Toma and the other members of Team Bardock with halos above their heads, those whom he truly wanted to see by visiting Hell. But in this moment, it's also revealed to him that Cognac has been traveling and battling alongside his old friends of the Home for Infinite Losers, acting as a stand-in for his son who's missing of the lineup, as a way of helping each other get by down there. Cognac even surprisingly takes the moment to genuinely praise the effective combat cell and the impressive accomplishments Bardock went on to achieve after he passed, citing his earlier dismissal as being a bit of a ruse, though Bardock obviously doesn't buy that. But as Cognac puts it, he's been hearing non-stop firsthand about just how proud he should be of at least one of his kids from the rest of his old squad, along with a few of the other dead Saiyans, old rivals and past targets found down in Hell, though still just as demeaning, goading, and seemingly projective as ever in his attempts to get the most ferocious fighting spirit he can out of Bardock. Cognac asserts that none of this means they're done here though, since proud as he may be as a father, as a warrior, he still thinks Bardock can't measure up to a team of loser Saiyans from his past, and the deadbeat dad he claims to have oh so far surpassed. Thus, with but a few fighting words, the battle restarts more untamed than ever, as for a short while, Bardock tries to contend against the power of this Neo Team Cognac, but to both his pride and chagrin, they're an effective force, and require all he has to combat, since his buddies know all his old moves extremely well, and even seem to have evolved their own while in the environment of Hell, the same way that Earth has acted as a catalyst for his techniques. This season surprised many a time, as Pumpkin has vastly improved his physical power, and has tempered it with more cunning timing and targeting to save his energy for brutal heavy attacks and kill shots, while the large and quiet Totepo has further honed his role as a tank, as Raditz would put it, having by Bardock's estimates become a true master at drawing in and eating hits his allies have no business taking with that massive appetite for food and fighting of his. Not to mention, he's packing a heavier punch than ever to boot as well. As for Celipa, we've already explored the changes in how strong she was when visiting Earth for her 24-hour pass, but with the rest of the team, it's exaggerated, as her role as a devastating ki blast specialist, whose quick and brutal attacks are used to dictate the range and scope of the battlefield, shine all the brighter when she fights alongside her brothers in arms. And finally, Toma still acts as an amazing strategist and tactician with his balanced skills and his use of basic techniques in surprising ways. All in all, combined with Cognac's style to form a much stronger unit than even he had with the group seemingly. However, such a stark challenge is useful for recognizing new heights and current limitations, as it leads to the extremely valuable experience of attempting to mix the spirit of the Saiyans with King Kai's signature Kaioken during the midst of the battle, which would of course later go on to be extremely beneficial in the rematch with Turles. But here, as a part of the growing pains of a debut use of a technique, this fails fairly miserably, and accomplishes nothing but breaking Bardock's own guard, as if karmically ordained, as he's hit full force with the immediate backlash that's harsh enough to stun and knock the scarred Saiyan down into a kneeling position, which of course leads mankind to smugly demanding his eldest child yield to him, chiding that Bardock has no hopes of winning in this case, unless he somehow turns fiction into fact and becomes a legendary Super Saiyan. But as they all know, that's not happening anytime soon in this lifetime. So unless he wants the beating of his afterlife, Bardock better take back what he said about growing beyond his father and his past as a Saiyan warrior. Or he can just admit that training with a couple of losers like them will do him some good. As the flashback pauses on another cliffhanger and returns to present day, we use the opportunity to check in with other key players.
I'm sorry, Father, but the days of diplomacy and negotiation have been over for a while. These ingrates will not learn to fear their betters unless some of them are made an example of. Whichever planet is the communication hub of these rebel scum shall simply be taken off the space charts. The loss of it matters not if you recover everything else.
This is the argument made by the still petulant and immature current Emperor of the universe, as he engages in a very critical council with his most trusted advisors. By our standards, coming from the viewpoint of canon, where so many of the current events are meant to be taking place multiple decades later than they currently are, our Frieza here is still rather inexperienced in his role. Thus, even his father King Cold feels his direct presence necessary to discuss how to handle a tricky matter together, such as planets and extinct races suddenly popping back into existence like magic, and defying a few basic concepts of reality. Really, it was enough to rattle any ruler. So of course, Cold couldn't exactly blame his little wicked prodigy, but he did need to rein him in, since even Barry Blue would have trouble doing so now. Yes, Frieza, my sweet boy, I agree with you. But to do that, we actually need to know which planet we're aiming for to take them off the space map. Otherwise, we'll waste our precious effort and time. The former Emperor can understand his child's logic, of course, though he finds it rash, because Frieza has never had to deal with a mostly unconquered galaxy before, as he inherited this role from Cold, so he can still only consider approaching things from a more ill-tempered and short-sighted perspective. Meanwhile, King Cold brings a level of chilling wisdom and clarity to the matter that his baby boy lacks, and thus serves as the best possible confidant to soothe and temper his rage into productivity, such as trying to dissuade him against an expensive shock and awe campaign, which would further eat into their manpower and profits. He can also offer the sage advice of a well-seasoned genocidal conqueror, since quite a few of the reported returned planets are ones that he may have accidentally wiped out or left uninhabitable by being a bit too overzealous in his rookie days, or at the very least he would have overseen it. So he wants Frieza to avoid those same mistakes and thus achieve a greater yield of revenue from the Empire than he ever did. Though first they need to figure out its origin, since this quote-unquote crisis should be looked at as a miraculous opportunity, with the idea of attaining greater glory and making an even greater killing in the market than his father has, thankfully beginning to calm Frieza. To this end, as an opening to continue into something he's sure Frieza won't enjoy hearing, Cold makes another very sound point, that while Frieza has little experience with the galaxy in this state, his older brother actually has a decent amount in comparison, and so he's decided to personally ask that he return to the forces of the main fold, with his personal cooler force and armored squadron, since their added manpower would be of great use in such an unthinkable time as this. As a result, even before Frieza can really get going with a new chorus of petulant protests, Cooler's face appears on a large video call, and he greets the council, his father, and his Emperor little brother, coolly. Cooler injects his own agreement with King Cold's position, of course, and even engages in a small verbal fencing match with his younger brother that's a bit less flippant than usual, as the group shares some banter before deciding to meet back up in person soon on a central Frieza Empire-controlled planet to conduct more thorough planning. However, in the middle of the call, Cooler has to go subtly, and even politely blows Frieza off when the younger son demands he stay, since father has made such a big deal about involving him, as Cooler ignores this and ends the feed anyway. Cold chuckles to himself and pours another glass of space wine. Though their relationship as father and sons is not nearly as traditionally loving and understanding of each other as what we've seen from Bardock and his Stowaways, it is by no means less of a danger, especially as a family unit. In fact, they may be more so because of it, since by forcing them to work closely together so that their sibling rivalry flourishes, Cooler and Frieza will continue to push each other higher, while furthering the ambition of their wicked bloodline, even broader across the universe, rather than getting complacent as prodigies are wont to do. Now instead, they'll have no choice but to continue competing for his attention, affection, and the final victory of claiming the Empire's throne, with their victories in the upcoming campaign being the means of keeping score. Meanwhile, elsewhere in the inky void of space, Vegeta and Turles arrive on a Frieza-controlled planet. At least, the planet was controlled by the Frieza Force formerly, as in the wake of the upheaval caused by the strange reappearance of so many planets and people, Cooler and his armored squadron had already begun taking advantage of the situation, right when his father had contacted him actually. Thus, Planet Frieza number 79, which just so happened to be the closest colonized planet to the Earth in the system, had just a few weeks ago been put under new management, hence its new designation is Planet Cooler number 97, and this was also the reason an unexpected distress call from the planet Earth was immediately patched through the Cooler instead of Frieza. Now, as a spare attack pod they had patrolling in the area, in case one of their units needed it, returns to base with such an interesting find, the oldest son of Code's wicked bloodline is revealed, as Cooler personally joins the aviation crew on the launch pad to receive its occupants, huddled close to the point of clinging to one another while having shared a life support system built only for a single occupant. At first glance, this would appear to simply be two of those Saiyans Frieza so rashly decided to exterminate, though in this case, both in fairly critical conditions. Though of greater interest, after closer inspection, is that one Cooler quickly recognizes was specifically the last surviving member of the race's royalty, and his little brother's former favorite toy, which he had at some point lost, and of course whined about endlessly and petulantly, while trying to rope Cooler into searching his areas of the universe as well, which he obviously did not out of spite. And this coupled with the fact that Prince Vegeta also offered extremely valuable intel in exchange for saving the other Saiyan's life. How could Cooler pass up the chance to snag such a deal for such useful pawns and knowledge? Unfortunately, the prince seemed to already be in rather dire straits before he boarded the ship with the low-class Saiyan and began using his life support systems, meaning the would-be emperor needed to wait a bit before he could conduct his interrogation. But afterwards, he was considering visiting this Earth place before he and the armored squadron went to rendezvous with the rest of the family. At the same time, Vegeta and Turles were deposited in healing chambers at literally the last possible moment before Turles' life force was liable to give out. Though in contrast to that, their bond is also shown to have vastly deepened, alongside their key sense to even recognize how close they were to running out the clock. Though much more importantly, they are 100% on the same page of understanding this bowing of the head to Cooler is only a temporary means to an end, one that has only added his name to their long revenge list, directly under Bardock, Raditz, Kakarot, and the rest of that cursed cobbled together family. And meanwhile, as we've certainly been anxious for, the reaction on Earth to these major changes in plans has finally come about. The only thing that would be typical about the next day is that Gine, Grandpa Gohan, and Muesli awake to find that the boys and Bardock are gone. At first, they assume they are off doing their usual morning walk in spars, likely to get their minds off how dour things have been lately. But by the time afternoon rolls by, with no one returning home for lunch, they know something is off. Knowing it's now probably worth a look, they begin checking with their still grieving friends, starting with Anan and Chi-Chi, who not only have no leads, but they aren't in any state to help on account of being hysterical about Ox King's passing, much like he would often be, rather than their usual grace and serenity. The 3 schools of martial arts the boys train at are also no help, on account of also being in mourning over students and teachers alike, and even their technologically advanced allies in Bulma's family and the remaining members of the Pilaf gang can find no trace of their friends. Thus, with deep pits in their stomachs, they decide to check the mountain range the Heeters are supposed to be staying at on the ship, but they are no longer there either, which officially turns the alarm bells that had been going off in their heads into full-on rage sirens, deeming this officially warranted, whereas it usually feels a bit perverted to look in on people when you don't have a fancy title like Kami. Muesli uses her eyes and follows her worst assumptions and fears to draw her gaze off planet, and with how extra suspiciously quiet both King Kai and Kami are, it confirms her fears that they must all be aboard the fleeing Heeter ship, which is already growing dangerously close to leaving the range of her gaze. As she catches this sight and relays to the others her findings, she hones her vision in even further to the point of seeing inside the vessel and getting her eyes on Bardock and the boys, even at this distance. At this point, she begins to try and stare an angry hole in the back of the scarred Saiyan's head, which Bardock even awkwardly seems to sense and get the chills from. Though with everything going on, he understandably doesn't seem to dwell on it too long, moving ever forward like a stubborn dumbass. After a discussion about how sometimes it feels like Bardock, for as serious and grumpy as he is, can be just as big a kid as the boys. Regardless, this is once again about family, so needless to say, both of the warrior mothers want to go after the 4 delinquent Earth-defending fighters, but their options to do so are limited on account of the Earth's current space travel tech, and because it could be quite dangerous for both them and the Earth to leave it at a time like this, knowing how things go usually. Grandpa Gohan, however, notes that they aren't without any options to follow Bardock and the boys, as there is a means of travel without the Dragon Balls this time, though it's unlikely they could both fit, as he shows and reminds them of the single remaining attack pod that belonged to Raditz, which Bardock didn't destroy the original trio they arrived to Earth in. Gine now remembering they decided to do that just in case of emergency, and this certainly fits. The question of whether they could hand it over to Bulma's family at Capsule Corp to refurbish and possibly expand to hold everyone does cross the trio's mind, but the clock seemingly ticking and the distance growing, the time to do so is a luxury they don't have. As a result, it is decided by Gine that Muesli ultimately should be the one to go, as she is a bit better at tracking Bardock specifically, and can keep her eyes on them to make catching up easier if she leaves soon. While on the other hand, Gine is still a good bit stronger than her, and could defend the planet better by herself if something were to happen. Though after everything lately, she's really hoping nothing will this time, as suddenly having to make travel preparations, and then tense goodbyes and promises to bring back their runaway family members, and ensure they have a nice and peaceful home to come back to respectively. Gohan and Gine wish her luck, before Muesli sets off after Bardock and the boys. But that's where we'll be leaving this one off for right now.